Welcome to Washington Hospital Today, the program dedicated to sharing timely information about the community hospital that's been taking care of Washington Township Healthcare District residents since it opened in 1958. Washington Hospital Today is provided for the sole purpose of informing residents about healthcare topics and issues that have been covered during community forums, free health and wellness classes, or as part of educational sessions held during the district's open board meetings. This program is one more way that Washington Hospital helps empower you, the residents of the district, by providing information needed to make informed decisions about your health.
Today's presenter is Lorie Roffelsen, RD. Lorie Roffelsen is a registered dietitian at Washington Hospital Healthcare System. Lorie completed her studies at San Francisco State University. She is a prominent speaker for Washington Hospital's community outreach educational programs.
Hi, good afternoon. Well, I think we're still finding the answers relating to how diet and our lifestyle affect our risk for different types of cancer, but I hope I have some information here today that might steer you in the right direction. Since today the spotlight is on colon and rectal cancers, that's primarily what my information will be on, but a lot of it is also just general information for, reducing our risk for other types of cancer as well. One interesting fact about colorectal cancer is that it is mainly a disease of high-income countries. And the rates in, like the United States or other high-income countries, is almost 3 times the rate in lower-income or middle-income countries. So we have to ask, what are we doing here? What are we eating? Or what's our lifestyle compared to those countries to increase our risk? And the trend they also see in the world is as other countries become more affluent, their rates of colorectal cancer actually increase as well. But colorectal cancer is also one of the most preventable cancers because with early screening and detection and treatment, it is very treatable, as Dr. Verapan was discussing. And we also know that there's some lifestyle and dietary factors that we can control that can also decrease our risk. Research shows that many cases of colorectal cancer are not inevitable and that people can significantly reduce their risk by making changes in their diet and their lifestyle. One of the groups that is continually looking at research and studies and the science is the World Cancer Research Fund and the American Institute for Cancer Research. And they released an updated report in 2011 with new recommendations, and so they've kind of compiled all the studies, everything that's going around in the world to make their recommendations. And they said one of their interesting facts was they think the number of preventable colorectal cancer cases in the U.S. every year could be as high as 45% or about 64,000 cases if every American followed these recommendations for cancer prevention. So that includes eat more fiber-rich plant foods, eat less red meat and processed meat, drink less alcohol, and move more and stay lean. And that's their recommendations in a nutshell, and we're going to get into them a little more in depth. But if all Americans could do those things, we would be reducing our risk for colorectal cancer. So let's go over what our risk factors for cancer are, for some cancers. The foods we choose to eat, energy imbalance, meaning if we are taking in more calories than we are burning off. If we have a sedentary lifestyle. If we're carrying around extra weight. If we smoke or drink alcohol in excess, and then of course our genetics. So if you look at the list, most of those factors are things we can control or do something about, except for our genetics. Those we can't, we're born with them, right? And so we know cancer is a disease of genetic and environmental interaction. So if we have the genetic predisposition, and depending on what our lifestyle is or what we eat or what we have in our environment, that can affect our risk. Now there's a diet and cancer link that we want to talk about today. So because we're talking about colorectal cancer, and food, everything we eat or ingest goes through that digestive tract. So we know that some cancers and tumors can arise from cells that are damaged or their DNA is damaged. And exposure to a mutagen or a carcinogen can occur in the digestive tract. Excessive oxidative stress or oxidation can also damage and mutate cells. So some of the factors listed there can increase oxidation in the body. A high-fat diet, excessive alcohol intake, smoking, sunlight, environmental pollutants, those are outside influences, but those can also increase our risk. Or if we have a low intake of fruits and vegetables which have natural antioxidants, which kind of help protect the body from the cell damage that we're talking about. And we know cancer, it doesn't happen overnight. It's something that progresses in stages and can progress over a lot of time. But usually there's a first stage, the initiation stage, and that's where the cell is exposed to a carcinogen or some kind of oxidative damage. And that can happen repeatedly over time. So for example, if you are a smoker, you're exposing the body to that carcinogen or that oxidative stress repeatedly over time. The promotion stage is in the right environment, accelerated division of that damaged cell can occur and can lead to uncontrolled growth or cancer. Things that we consider initiators or promoters of the cancer process would be poor nutrition, if you're overweight or taking excess calories, if tobacco or alcohol are in your environment, physical inactivity, or if you have an overabundance of hormones or other growth factors. So the current recommendations for cancer prevention are try to eat mostly foods of plant origin, and we'll talk a little more about that. Exercise regularly and maintain a healthy weight. Limit red meat, fat, and processed meats, and I'm going to give you some specifics about that. Drink alcohol in moderation, if at all. Prepare and store your food safely. Rather than rely on dietary supplements, get those nutrients from food. So I used to have a slide, it was a bullet. I said, there is no magic bullet that is, going to solve all your problems or protect you from cancer. It's really, we have to think about it as a lifestyle change or a way of life. And then of course, don't smoke or use tobacco. That's a big one. Now, for cancers of the colon, there's some specific research and convincing evidence, meaning it's strong evidence that physical activity and foods containing fiber decrease your risk for colon and rectal cancer. So the evidence is strong for that, and that red meat, processed meat, alcoholic drinks for men, body fatness, and specifically abdominal fatness around your abdomen increase your risk. So there's convincing evidence in those areas. Then the evidence is, sometimes all the studies don't agree or show the same result. So in some cases, the evidence is a little less strong. Probably garlic, milk, and calcium decrease your risk for colon and rectal cancer. And alcoholic drinks for women probably increase your risk. So the evidence is stronger for men and alcohol than it is for women and alcohol. And then limited but suggestive evidence says that non-starchy vegetables, fruits, food containing folate, foods containing selenium, and vitamin D will decrease your risk for colon and rectal cancer. And there's still, ongoing studies going on all the time. If we have this lecture again in a year or two, I may come back with different information that says, okay, the evidence is stronger now for vitamin D or stronger now for one of these other nutrients. But right now, they showed limited evidence. Increased risk with foods containing iron, cheese, foods containing animal fats, and foods containing added sugars. So now let's talk about each specific recommendation, eating more plant-based foods. There's, depending on which organization you listen to, the recommendation for fiber is somewhere in the range 25 to 35 grams of fiber per day. And you can get that by eating a variety of fruits and vegetables. So the reason the plant-based diet is the way to go is you're getting vitamins, minerals, fiber, it's low calorie, and there's antioxidants and just, parts of that vegetable or plant that are protective from many diseases. Legumes like beans, peas, and lentils are a good alternative to maybe animal protein if you want to work them into your diet on a regular basis. Again, they have fiber, protein, no cholesterol, and they're low in fat. And then also in the category of plant-based foods would be your starches, like grains, wheat, rice. These offer fiber, satiety to keep, fill you up, energy, vitamins, and also minerals. Now you might hear about whole grains. Why are whole grains better? Whole grains contain the whole part of the grain, the bran, the endosperm, and the germ part. When you eat a refined or processed grain, like a white bread, it's been stripped of usually the bran and the germ, which contains fiber, B vitamins, and phytochemicals, which can't be replaced, once they've been stripped from the grain. So you can buy a bread that is enriched with B vitamins, so they've been replaced again, but it's not the same thing as eating that whole grain the way it was, the way it came out of the earth. So try to choose whole grains most of the time. At least half your choices every day should be some kind of whole grain. The table I have here, I highlighted in yellow the column that shows the dietary fiber in these different types of grains. Some of these are a little unusual, like spelt or kamut. I listed them by the ones at the top go down in descending order to the ones who have less fiber in them. You'll see barley near the top, quinoa, oat bran, oatmeal is kind of in the middle. Brown rice has a lot more fiber in it than white rice, which is at the bottom of the list. So try to limit your white rice and include more of like the brown rice or the other whole grains. But you can do a variety of grains. But you can see that if you're trying to increase fiber, you're going to get more from the ones near the top of the list. Fiber is believed to be protective in colon and rectal cancer because it increases stool bulk and the weight, and fiber speeds elimination of dietary carcinogens and excess hormones from the body. So it moves things through faster, is basically what it does. Fiber protects the intestinal walls from damage by soaking up destructive bile acids. So when Dr. Verapan was talking about fat also, so when you eat a high-fat diet or say fried food, that does stimulate your gallbladder to release more bile. So then you have more bile in your meal, more bile in the intestine. So that can be destructive to the intestinal walls. Fiber also slows the absorption of food after a meal, and it helps steady your levels of glucose and insulin. And as fiber ferments in the colon, it produces short-chain fatty acids, which help regulate the growth rate of the cells that line the colon. So fiber is also beneficial for constipation, to help keep you regular, for diverticular disease, which somebody talked about earlier, high cholesterol. So certain types of fiber I'm going to talk about help bind dietary cholesterol, hypertension, hemorrhoids, and diabetes. So lots of other good reasons to try to increase your fiber. So foods, plant foods, are vegetables, grains are sources of fiber. And usually they're not just one type. It's usually a mix of insoluble, which is not completely broken down, and soluble fiber. So insoluble fiber, think about it as like the scrub brush that kind of cleans out the colon. And there's some examples there of whole grains that are good sources of insoluble fiber. So look for whole grain products that when you're buying your bread or tortillas or cereals or crackers, that give you some fiber. With fresh fruit, if you leave on the peel, like the peel on your apple, is very high in insoluble fiber. So eat your whole apple if you can and leave the peel on. Peel on vegetables as well is going to give you more insoluble fiber. And then nuts and seeds of all kind are a good source of insoluble fiber. Soluble fiber, I call like the sponge, soaks up things like bile acids, cholesterol, so it's also good for you in a different way. Oat bran, oatmeal, barley, psyllium are the best grain sources of soluble fiber. And then you can also get it from different types of beans, like garbanzo beans, kidney beans, pinto beans. Fruits like citrus, so oranges are a good source of soluble fiber, apples, pears, plums. And then some of the vegetables like broccoli, onion, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, and okra also give you some soluble fiber. So I gave you here a sample of a high fiber menu. So if you're aiming for 25 to 35 grams a day, one strategy is start your breakfast with a good source of fiber. So you it'll be easier the rest of the day if maybe you have like a good high fiber cereal at breakfast, or a high fiber cereal bar if you're on the run and you can't sit and eat, cereal. It could be high. I know I've seen there's some higher fiber breads that you can buy now. So try to get a good source at breakfast. If you have a cup of Raisin Bran with your milk, the milk doesn't really contribute any fiber. So that's all from the Raisin Bran. So that's 7.5 grams. And then if you eat a whole orange, that's another 3 grams. And then choose your snacks wisely. If you choose a whole grain cracker or choose nuts or fruit or vegetables, you can add some fiber there. At lunch, I listed whole wheat bread, 2 slices with hummus, which is a garbanzo bean spread. So there's some fiber in that, with lettuce and tomato. So that's about 6 grams. With a banana, that gives you another 3 grams. And then for a snack, I chose celery and peanut butter, which gives me another 3 grams. And then for dinner, a large dinner salad with, you choose whatever vegetables you like. I put kidney beans and carrot and tomatoes, and that added up to about 10 grams of fiber. And then a dinner roll on the side, a whole wheat dinner roll, gave me another 2 grams. So this sample plan added up to about 38 grams for the day, which is great. And I have days where I eat more fiber. It seems like I have a good day, and then other days I feel like I've missed out on some of my vegetables and fruits. So don't kick yourself if you feel like you're not getting in enough fiber, but just try to plan ahead and have things that are higher fiber around to choose from, and either take with you or eat. One of the other recommendations focused on physical activity and body weight, and there was strong convincing evidence from a lot of studies that regular exercise will decrease your risk for colon cancer. And it seemed that the more you exercise, the more your risk was lower. So just a little bit of exercise might not be as protective, but it does help with weight maintenance. It reduces inflammation, and it lowers insulin resistance and insulin levels after meals. There's strong evidence that increased risk for colorectal cancer is higher with increased waist circumference or increased waist to hip ratio. So if you measure your waist circumference, a higher waist circumference means you're carrying more abdominal fat, and that puts you at higher risk for colon cancer. And your waist to hip ratio would be your inches around your waist divided by the inches around your hip. And down at the bottom there's a table. The higher that ratio is, the more at risk you are for colorectal cancer or other diseases. So you want to try to minimize abdominal fat obesity, which is sometimes where, people tend to gain it. You might gain it here, you might gain it on your hips, but try to keep that number down. So a man with a waist measurement greater than 40 inches or a woman with a waist measurement greater than 35 inches has increased risk for other health problems. Aside from cancer, it could be heart disease or diabetes also. But you can do that measurement on your own if you are curious. So if you haven't been exercising to this point, but now you hear this recommendation and you want to start doing something, don't just run out and start doing a strenuous activity. You should probably check with your doctor and start slowly. So the aim is 30 minutes a day. Start with brisk walking, bike riding, or it can be stationary bike riding, gardening, dancing. Those are all good activities you could try to do on a daily basis. And then once you are doing your activity on a regular basis, try to do at least once a week something that is a little bit more vigorous, like hiking or walking hills. Maybe get to the point where you're swimming or jogging or doing something that gets your heart rate up even more. You could aim for 30 minutes to start, working yourself up to an hour a day of exercise. So as we get older, we really need to try to keep active. The other new recommendation, which actually is real specific as far as how much red meat we should consume, is up to 18 ounces per week. So red meats would include beef, pork, and lamb. And research is pretty strong in this area. It shows a dose-response relationship between higher intake and higher rate of cancer risk. So instead of red meat, try to choose more fish, skinless poultry, non-animal protein, or non-domesticated animal, which would be leaner. The association with red meat, it's believed that when red meat is digested, it creates some compounds in the colon called N-nitroso compounds, which can be carcinogenic. And you don't see that with other types of animal protein like fish or chicken. But red meat, because it's high in iron, is believed to do that. Now, 18 ounces for some of you might sound like a lot if you don't eat a lot of red meat. But for other people who love their red meat, just kind of be mindful of portions. If you eat out at a restaurant or a steakhouse, their steaks may be 10 ounces, depending on what you order. So if you're home and you're grilling now and barbecuing this summer, just be mindful of portions. And if you try to keep it to a 3-ounce portion, that's about the size of a deck of playing cards, which is not very big. But that is the recommended portion to have it at a meal. So try it, and instead of eating more meat, include more vegetables at your meal to maybe offset the meat that you're decreasing. And you may end up saving some money. So if you're used to buying more meat, think about smaller portions for everyone and just buy what you think you're going to need. And they are talking about cooked portions, so 18 ounces cooked per week. Now this is a picture of the old American plate that is, the meat is the star of the meal, a big portion, not a lot of vegetable, and the mashed potatoes got a lot of butter and fat on there. And what we want to do is try to work away from the old American plate to a healthier, leaner, different American plate that can still have some protein on it, some animal protein, but the portion is smaller. and we're including more vegetables and try to include more whole grains and beans in the picture as well. Now, if you go on the internet, there's actually an updated page at the USDA. They're in charge of the food guide pyramid, which we've always used as a teaching tool, but they've replaced it now with myplate.gov. So if you want to go look at that, it's a more easy visual for people as far as how to meal plan, how much they should have at their, on their plate of the different food groups. So if you're interested, also you can use this as a guide for meal planning, myplate.gov. Now, in addition to red meat, the recommendation is to try to avoid as much as possible processed meats. And the majority of studies showed increased risk for cancer with higher intake of processed meats. Nitrates and nitrites are used to preserve meats like bacon and sausage, etc. They're a flavor enhancer, and they also help fix the color to kind of a nice, attractive pink or red color. They also produce in the colon these N-nitroso compounds, which can be a potential carcinogen. So if you are someone who eats bacon every day or sausage every day, that really does increase your risk for colon cancer. So avoid them as much as possible. It doesn't mean you have to, if you're at the Giants game and you really want a hot dog, have the hot dog, but try not to eat them on a daily basis. The other strong recommendation is to have alcohol only in moderation. So for women, that means 1 drink per day. For men, that means 2 drinks per day. A drink is just 1.5 ounces of 80 proof spirit, or 5 ounces of wine, or 12 ounces of beer. One study looked at alcohol intake in people who also had a low intake of folic acid, and they had a 2 to 5-fold elevation in colorectal cancer. The other recommendation is keep food safe to eat. So if you eat foods that are spoiled or moldy, they actually may be a source of a carcinogen or mutagen. So you don't want to eat foods that have mold or are spoiled. And at home, practice food safety rules. Wash your hands before cooking. Refrigerate foods quickly after meals. Don't let them sit out at room temperature for very long, and they should be below 40 degrees Fahrenheit in your refrigerator. And if you're defrosting foods, do it under refrigeration, not on the countertop, because even though you might think that it's safe because it's still frozen on the inside, that meat, let's say you're defrosting some meat, it will get probably into an unsafe temperature on the outside before the inside is defrosted. And then you've got that risk of bacteria growing on the outside of the meat, which may or may not be killed when you cook it. So you want to defrost things under refrigeration. And if you have leftovers, consume them within 2 to 4 days, even if they've been in your refrigerator. Because even under refrigeration, some bacteria can grow, so you don't want to let them sit there too long before they get consumed. And then do not eat charred meats or charred foods. So here we are, barbecue season, and how many of you like to char your meat? No hands up? No. Okay. Yes, one. Be honest, it's okay. Unfortunately, charred meat, or that charred portion, can be a source of carcinogens, so we want to talk about that. A couple different carcinogens can form on charred meat. One are called polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and they form when fat is burned. So if you've got fat dripping off your steak that you're cooking, it drips down onto that open flame. It will create, in the smoke that goes back up, it coats the meat with these polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and then if you eat it, you're eating that carcinogen. The other one is called heterocyclic amines, and these can form when foods are cooked at very high temperatures, like when you barbecue. They can be, usually they're found on like poultry and steak and fish. So if you use moderate or lower cooking temperatures, you're less likely to form these heterocyclic amines. Poaching, stewing, simmering, microwaving is considered more of a lower or moderate cooking temperature. And you're more likely to form mutagens if you fry, barbecue, charbroil, and grill. So here are some strategies for grilling safely. Before you grill, trim all the visible fat off your meat, or take the skin off the chicken so you've got less fat potentially dripping on the fire. And choose lean cuts. You could pre-cook your meat, meaning you could parboil it inside or microwave it a little bit so it has less actual cooking time over that very high heat temperature. And studies have shown marinating the meats before you grill them can reduce the creation of these heterocyclic amines quite a bit. They recommend using an oil-free marinade that has an acidic component or acidic ingredient like lemon juice or a vinegar or orange juice. Try to avoid flare-ups while you're grilling, and if you do create some charred portion, just remove those before you eat. Now let's talk about some nutrients that have been of interest for cancer prevention. One of them is folic acid or folate. We already know it's protective before and during pregnancy for prevention of birth defects, and it also has cardiovascular benefits. It's believed to protect our genetic material, and some studies have found that 75% lower risk of colon cancer is seen in those who consumed 400 micrograms a day of folic acid, and that was in the Nurses' Health Study. There isn't a recommendation to supplement with folic acid for colon cancer prevention, but these are foods where you can find folate naturally. Dark green leafy vegetables, legumes, strawberries, orange juice, asparagus, and okra are all good sources. And it's in a lot of vitamin supplements naturally. It's enriched in, a lot of breakfast cereals are enriched with folic acid, and other foods more and more are actually enriched with folic acid. So it is pretty plentiful in those foods. There is some decent evidence that milk and calcium can protect against colorectal cancer. The evidence says it probably does protect against colorectal cancer. The evidence for vitamin D is a little more limited, and there's still, again, ongoing studies and research looking at that. One study saw a reduced rate of recurrent polyps in a group that had 1,200 micrograms of calcium, milligrams of calcium per day. Recently, the dietary reference intakes for calcium and vitamin D were revised, and they've actually been increased in most of the groups. So for the age groups here, we're probably in the range of 1,000 to 1,200 milligrams a day of calcium that we need based on our age. And then you can see in the column for vitamin D, it's pretty much 600 until you reach the age of 70, and then it goes up to 800 international units a day that we need. And if you're pregnant or lactating, the needs are a little bit different, a little bit higher. Milk products are probably the best source of calcium, but not the only source. Kale and greens are an excellent source of calcium. Calcium is fortified in a lot of foods, and if you don't eat a lot of those calcium-rich foods, then you should discuss maybe a supplement with your doctor. Vitamin D is fortified in milk. There's vitamin D supplements now. It's also in fatty fish, and you get a natural source from sun exposure if you get out in the sun. And if you go out early, the sun isn't too strong, so that's what I try to do. You may have also heard about the benefits of phytochemicals in cancer protection. These are the chemicals that are naturally in plants and vegetables and fruits. They are what give the vegetable its color, its smell, and they generally act as antioxidants to protect the plant from sun exposure and being out, being out in the elements all day. A lot of phytochemicals act as antioxidants. Some have anti-inflammatory properties. Some suggest they inhibit cancer cells or slow down tumor growth. So listed here are some of the foods that are good sources of different phytochemicals. Soy, tomato, broccoli, garlic, blueberries, citrus, peppers. Selenium is a trace mineral that has had some research as well regarding its cancer protection. It acts as an antioxidant to protect cells from damage and may also slow down tumor growth. It's found in plant foods, and an interesting fact I read about it was, depending on the region, because the plants from certain regions will have more selenium if there's a lot of selenium in that soil. So for example, in the United States, in the high plains of northern plains of Nebraska and North Dakota and South Dakota, in that region there's a lot of selenium in the soil. So foods from that region are going to be higher in selenium. If you're in an area that doesn't have as much in the soil, the foods grown in that area may not have as much. So it's found in plant foods, it's found in some meat, some seafood. Brazil nuts are a very high source of selenium. Not all the studies that have looked at the relationship between selenium and decreased rates of cancer all agree. So there isn't a recommendation to supplement with selenium, but just, as long as you're eating foods, plant foods and food sources, that is a way to get your selenium in. And the dietary reference intake for it is 55 micrograms a day. It's a trace element, so you don't need a lot of it. So here are some popular antioxidants that may have some cancer protection. And I'm just listing the food sources because none of these have a recommendation for supplementation. So again, there's no magic bullet for cancer protection, just trying to include these foods in the diet is the way to go. So vitamin C is found in citrus, tomato, potatoes, green peppers, cabbage, and berries. Vitamin E, found in wheat germ, vegetable oils, dark green leafy vegetables, nuts, and legumes. Vitamin A, or beta carotene, is found in all those bright red and yellow and orange vegetables and fruits like carrots and sweet potato, cantaloupe, broccoli, spinach, collard greens, egg yolk, squash, apricots, peaches. Berries are known to be high in antioxidants. Blueberries have anthocyanosides in them, which are a potent antioxidant. And strawberries, raspberries have lagic acid, which is an antioxidant that helps the body deactivate carcinogens. So in general, just try to include berries. Right now, I think they're coming more into season and the prices are coming down. So, eat what's in season and enjoy, and then move on to what's coming in the summer and the fall. In the allium family is where we have garlic, and there are a lot of studies that show garlic has been shown to slow down or stop the growth of tumors or reduce the risk for colon cancer. So rather than take a garlic supplement, I would cook with garlic, include it in your cooking, and also include like onions and scallions, leeks and chives. Those are all in the same family. Grapes and grape juice are a rich source of resveratrol, another antioxidant and anti-inflammatory. The skin of the grape is the best source, and red, purple grapes are higher than green grapes in the resveratrol. And you don't have to get it from wine. You can get it from grapes or from grape juice. Cruciferous vegetables have potentially anti-cancer properties as well. These include kale, cauliflower, broccoli, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, bok choy, collard and mustard greens, Swiss chard, and watercress. Omega-3s may also slow tumor growth, reduce inflammation, and help chemo drugs work more effectively. And these type of fish, like salmon and herring, sardines, cod, sea bass, halibut, are all high in omega-3s. The plant kind of omega-3s is found in flaxseed, canola oil, walnut, soybeans, wheat germ, green leafy vegetables, and beans. And then some studies have looked at green tea. It has some potent phytochemicals called polyphenols. And some studies say it may act to short circuit the cancer process. And Asian data links green tea consumption to low rates of some cancer. Green tea can enhance the effect of some blood thinners. So if you are on Coumadin, for example, you may be able to have limited amounts of green tea. You might want to check with your doctor before including green tea in your diet. So to summarize, my tips to cut down your cancer risk: try to eat plenty of plant-based foods, keep active and maintain a healthy weight, limit your red meat, processed meats, fat, and salt, drink alcohol in moderation, if at all, prepare and store your food safely, and don't smoke or use tobacco in any form. And that's my talk.
All right, thank you, Lorie.
Welcome.
Question right here.
Yeah, on page 6, your 2 slides on insoluble fiber and soluble fiber, you have oats listed in both places. Could you explain that?
Well, a lot of grains may be a combination of both insoluble and soluble. They're not, most fruits and vegetables are not just one or the other. So they could be a good source of both.
Another question. I went over the list of the fruits here, and I don't see apples. They say that if you consume an apple a day, it drives the doctor away.
An apple a day drives the doctor away. Well, apples are high in soluble fiber. I think they're on my list for soluble fiber. And if you eat the skin, then you've included a lot of insoluble fiber too.
We've been warned not to eat the skin on a lot of things because of the way they are sprayed for, insecticides. Which should we do?
Well, you can, someone said wash them. You can wash to probably remove some. If you're buying organic, you're probably less, that's less of a concern. So if it's a fruit and you want to eat the skin, if you can find the organic version, then you don't have to worry about this, what might be in the skin. I just saw an interesting article about dirty foods, and one listed was melons. So I always wash my melons before I even cut into them. But you're not eating the skin on melons, so. But that's another issue. But yeah.
On page 2, I see the sunlight, the risk of cancer. Is this for colon cancer or any cancer? What is the relation of sunlight?
I didn't understand the. Oh, sunlight. Well, overexposure to sun can cause skin cancer. It increases oxidative stress on the body. Not directly colon cancer.
Excuse me. I have a few questions on the foods. Number one, for kidney disease, they say don't eat but just a half of an orange.
Mm-hmm.
And here it said you could eat a whole orange.
So if you have kidney disease, sometimes the list of fruits that are allowed is very different. They have to be lower in potassium. So yeah, oranges would probably not be on your list. Maybe a portion of an orange, but you could eat you'd have to see what your list includes for lower potassium fruit and just have, like you could have an apple instead. So an apple would be okay for a kidney patient, and you'll get the fiber that you would get from the orange.
Also, now like on the vegetables, with the kidney disease, they said don't eat broccoli. The heads of the broccoli, or that is supposed to be where. Also on the cereal, what do you mean by an enriched cereal? Breakfast cereal.
Oh, most breakfast cereals are enriched with vitamins. You'll see if you look in the ingredient label, it shows the vitamins. Usually it's B vitamins that they've added, and usually folic acid.
And on bread they say to eat white bread, and yet
Right.
some say eat wheat bread. And
Yeah.
it's
Well-
kind of confusing.
Well, these are general recommendations for people who don't have, you have to take into account other health conditions that you might have to alter the plan a little bit. Like that high fiber menu for you would be a little bit different because of your consideration for that. Would just be just like if somebody also had diabetes, their plan might be a little bit different. So